Amen.
All right, so we're moving along in the book of Numbers. This is actually week number 4. So if you remember correctly, we were in the second cycle for chapters 7 to 10a. The idea that in the first cycle, God was establishing this camp, and this camp was kind of on the order of a mobile new Eden that would be able to move. And with the establishment of the camp, now they're making preparations to go. And so the things we're going to talk about tonight are the consecration of the tabernacle and some preparations for the journey. Now, what I want you to do is just kind of open your Bibles real quick and skim chapters 7 to 10a. As you skim it, what are some of the preparations that you're seeing happening there?
Seems like each group brings the identical thing.
Okay, each group brings identical thing. Okay.
The
Offering.
offering.
Okay. Offering. Okay. So we have some redundancy there. Okay.
Okay, yeah.
Anything else?
It's very specific.
Okay. Very specific.
It sounds expensive.
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds expensive.
Like this is not just an offering, this is more of like a sacrifice. Kind of, it's going to mean a lot to them.
Okay. All right. Great. Anything else?
There are people named.
Okay. There's specific individual people that are named.
They would really have to, they couldn't just come up with this in like quickly. They would have to think about this.
And what way you mean they'd have to think about it? Are you talking about the offerings or?
Yeah, about the offerings. They couldn't just like, oh, let's just grab, you know, like for the finest flour. They would have to go and search for the best of the best, and it would take some time to get it
Okay.
all ready.
All right, great. So it moving, past chapter 7, what else do you see? What other preparations are being made?
The setting up of the lamps,
Okay, setting up of lamps.
and they were specific too.
Okay, yep, that was specific.
And expensive too.
Okay,
The Levites are being separated out.
okay,
And then they were told to observe Passover.
okay, yep. They were doing Passover. All right, good. So,
Wow, when they're 50 years old, they get to retire.
yes, well, that's sort of semi-retired. They still have work to do. It's just not that work. All right, so if we kind of skim those chapters, if we look at big, broad strokes, we have this, as you mentioned, extensive list of offerings. And as a matter of note, that chapter is actually the longest chapter in the Torah. We have additional instructions regarding the lampstands, consecration of Levites, celebration of Passover, and then it follows up with the silver trumpets. Okay, so these are some of the things we're going to look at tonight. So if we look at this extensive list of the offerings, what do you think the significance of it is being the longest in the entire Torah? I mean, out of everything that they in all 5 books, this is the single longest chapter. And do you find anything interesting or significant about that?
They all really had to have skin in the game.
Okay, they all had to have skin in the game. So, if I'm understanding you correctly, everybody participated. There wasn't
Mhm.
anybody that didn't participate.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, and we look at that, it was, all 12 tribes. Okay. So everybody had skin in the game. I love it. Anything else?
Well, every detail is covered. There's nothing unclear about this.
Okay. Nothing unclear about it.
Well, what is a wave offering?
A wave
Because-
offering? It's just,
Yeah.
it's a type of offering. It's a, like a Thanksgiving offering.
So Aaron's given up the Levites to the Lord as a Thanksgiving offering.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So that's when they're reconstructing the Passover.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So so would it be a stretch to say, I mean, everybody's got skin in the game, it's extremely detail oriented and all of those kinds of things. Would it be a stretch to say that, if something is long and detailed like that, that it might have a bit of importance to it?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, not such a stretch. So then, if you think about that, what would the takeaway be? If we're looking at this section of scripture, what would you take away from it?
It's something we should pay attention to.
Okay, good. It's something that we should pay attention to. Now, as something that we should pay, what should we pay attention to? Any good ideas? Does it have maybe anything to say to us in maybe the 21st century about worship?
Well, it was very intentional, like I said before, that they would have had to search around, prepare, take a long time getting ready for this. And it's a sacrifice. It's not just an offering, but when we give our offering into the plate on Sunday, how intentional are we about what we're doing there?
Okay. All right, good. All right, so let's kind of look at chapter 7 for a little bit. And basically what we want to look at is this section here that's highlighted in green. Okay, so we start in verse number 12. And it happened, the one who presented his offering on the first day was Nahshon, son of Amminadab, from the tribe of Judah. So basically, after each one, I think it was Jeanette said it's very repetitive. And so the repetition is in this, that as it happened on the first day, as it happened on the second day, as it happened on the third day, all the way down through 12. Okay, so it names a person from whatever tribe is being represented. And then this is kind of the boilerplate in the sense that his offering was 1 plate of silver. Its weight was 130 shekels, and 1 silver bowl weighing 70 shekels, according to the sanctuary shekel. Both of them filled with finely milled flour mixed with oil as a grain offering. 1 golden dish weighing 10 shekels filled with incense, 1 young bull, 1 ram, 1 male lamb in its first year as a burnt offering, and 1 he goat as a sin offering, and as a sacrifice of the fellowship offering 2 cattle, 5 rams, 5 he-goats, and 5 male lambs a year old. Okay, and then this was the offering of Nahshon, son of Abimadak. All right, so if we take that little section there and we repeat it, the green doesn't change. The green stays the same. The only thing that changes the day of the offering, the person offering it, and the tribe represented. Okay, and so this is what we have happening. This is the structure that we have. Now, as we look at that, what do we see as far as the sacrifices themselves?
Everybody's equal.
Oh, okay, everybody's equal. But I meant as far as the sacrifices. When we're looking at this, how many sacrifices are there, or offerings are there?
2, 3, 4, 5.
So is it grain offering?
Right.
Okay, a burnt offering and a sin offering. So have we seen those before?
Yes.
Okay, great. Where did we see those before?
In Leviticus, wasn't it?
Yes, it was
Yeah.
in Leviticus. And so these were the different offerings. And so if we think about the types of offering, what are they offering? Okay, so they're offering sort of for a Thanksgiving offering coming out of the their bounty. They're offering an offering for sin offering. So this is kind of a at the center of it is a relational thing with God. All right, so we have this kind of boilerplate thing that's happening. So it's during the 12-day festival, presenting the gifts to be used, and it's what the gifts are the things that are going to be used at the tent, and that each day the same gifts were offered by a different tribe. And as note, those who offered the gifts were exactly the same men who were responsible for the census. Okay, so that's the kind of the makeup. And so Sue already kind of let us off a little bit. What's the idea? What's the importance of this repetition? What do we get from that repetition? I think Sue already said that there was people that had skin in the game. And what was the second thing you said, Sue?
That they all, equality. They all
Yep.
had to give up the same thing. So nobody could feel that some other group wasn't pulling their weight.
Right. Fantastic. So everybody gave the same thing. So nobody was, more important or less important than someone else. Okay. Any other thoughts about why such repetition?
And these offerings were from each of the tribes, right?
Yes.
Okay.
One offering from each tribe.
Right.
Any other thoughts? So, scholar Gordon Wenham points out that there's a theological, that, there's a unity of the tribes, not only, as Sue said, that everybody's given the same thing. So there's equality, but there's also unity, that, each tribe had an equal share in the worship. Remember, they're giving gifts that were going to be used in the work of the temple. So each one had an equal share. Okay. And the idea that each tribe was fully committed and also was vetted as they supported the tabernacle. It wasn't, the tabernacle wasn't supported by 1 or 2 tribes. It was really, supported by all of them. Okay. And this, at the end of this, there was a signal that the tabernacle had been set up, it's operational, and the worship of God is now in effect. So if we think about this a little bit and think about, based on these maybe theological reasons. What does this speak to us today in the 21st century? Can we gain any insights for us today?
Well, if you extend it to, the tribes are like churches that, every group of people, every church denomination has an equal share in the worship of God.
Okay, yeah, if you take it kind of to that level, you could maybe take it down, when we talk about tribes, you could talk about families, clans within a single church. So you could take it from the single church level, you could take it to the multi-church denominational level, you could take it to the apostolic church. So we have these different ideas. So
I was
yeah,
looking
that's
at it like church unity, as
okay.
in Christianity and as a whole.
Okay, very good.
Yeah,
The
you spoke
Catholics, the
about it
Methodists, the Baptists.
Okay.
yesterday when you were giving your sermon about Jesus said in the end when he was going to leave that we should be as one as the Father and I are one.
Right.
So it kind of reminds me of that.
Okay, good. Good. Yeah, so I think as we think about this, today it's this idea about unity. I think it's also the idea that everyone is important and everyone needs to be valued. That everyone needs to be committed, that the work of the church doesn't fall on a single person, a single church, a single denomination, that all are supposed to be equally committed. Now, obviously, some churches, some places are bigger than others, and that commitment as far as resources go are going to be different, but they're all vetted. As you think about the idea of these gifts, what did you see? You said that it was very detailed. And Debbie said that, in some ways the offerings were kind of expensive. What else can we kind of glean from that? Any good ideas?
Sacrifice.
Okay, sacrifice.
I was thinking about this in terms of the tribes. Some of those tribes might have had more means than others. So for some of them, it might not have been a hardship, but for, I don't know, maybe others, it was really difficult to come up with those offerings.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So it might have been difficult for some to come up with those. I was kind of thinking, so if we look at the, let's go back here. And we look at what was there. So we have a silver plate, a silver bowl. We have finely milled flour. We have oil. We have a golden dish. We have incense. We have a bull. We have a lamb. What would it require in order to come up with an offering of this size?
I would imagine the people would have to pull their resources.
Okay, they have to pull their resources. Not only, when we think about pulling resources, we're thinking about, okay, this is an expensive proposition, but it's not like you can go down to Macy's and go and buy a silver plate or a silver bowl.
Yeah, they had to craft it. They
Yeah,
had to give of themselves and their talents.
exactly. And so in order to come up with this required the work of maybe the entire you know, the entire group of people, because you would have artisans that would be working with silver, artisans that would be working with gold. You'd have to have farming people, you'd have to have you know, agriculture people. So, you know, it's the way that these offerings are set up, it's not only the idea that you know, everybody's pooling their resources, and in some ways it's you know, expensive proposition, but also the idea that it required all kinds of people and all kinds of talent. So when we're making offerings of God, you know, it's not only our you know, resources in the sense of you know, our money, but it's also, you know, requires our use of talents as well. Okay.
And all this silver and all that they have
Mm-hmm.
all came from the Egyptians when they left through the Exodus, right? That's where
Yes.
they got all this stuff from?
Yep. Yep. That's where they got all this stuff from. Now, in some ways, as we think about this idea of the offerings, some ways we also have to look at it as kind of forward facing, in the sense that here we are in the desert. Where are they going to get all of this, the agricultural kind of stuff? So it's in some ways looking and anticipating the future. So if somebody go say something.
No, I was just going to say they have to plan for it.
Yeah.
Like that one that said that the animal had to be within a year of age.
Right. Yep. Yep. Everything was required to be planned for. Absolutely. And so, you know, in this longest section of the Torah that in some ways begs our attention and kind of pulls us to a place of importance, you know, out of all of this kind of stuff, and you know, we kind of focus on what we are doing. Okay, what is a human being doing? What are they doing and offering to God? But probably the most important verse in this whole section is chapter 7, verse 89. Okay, so kind of look at 7:89 for a minute. And you know what it says: and when Moses came to the tent of assembly to speak with him, that is Yahweh, he would hear the voice speaking to him from the atonement cover, which is on the ark side of the testimony, from between the two cherubim, and he would speak to him. So, you know, if we think about this whole idea of worship, the whole idea and purpose, you know, as you know, we said, okay, they have prepared this Eden and now they're getting ready to go. But the most important thing here is that, you know, God is speaking. Okay. The emphasis is, you know, God speaking. So communication. So in some ways, the whole intent of this idea of worship comes with, is relational, to service the tabernacle, so that we can have conversation with God. And if we kind of think about that, where does that push us back to?
Creation.
Yep, back to the garden.
Adam and Eve, right?
Yep, yep. And so as we think about that, that becomes very important, because we tend to focus on, okay, what are we doing? But, you know, really the whole important thing is this is primarily a place where God speaks to Moses. And I guess if we're kind of thinking and moving into the, you know, 21st century, and kind of what does it mean for us, you know, is the church primarily a place where God speaks to us? Do we come on Sunday mornings expecting to hear from God? Something that we just need to think about as we think about this section of Numbers. Okay, and so what does this piece of scripture have to say about Israelite worship? We kind of talked about that already. The idea of unity, the idea of everybody having skin in the game, the idea that it requires everybody's pulling of their resources and talents, that it was detailed, it was intentional, that it was very organized. Okay, and what does this have to say for us living in the 21st century? I would say in some ways, some similar kinds of things. All right, so then we move into this next section called the Seven Lamps, chapter 8. And so it's very, very brief. When Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to Aaron and say to him, when you are setting up the lamps, the 7 lamps will give light in front of the face of the lampstand." And Aaron did so. He set up the lampstand in front of the face of the lamps, just as Yahweh commanded Moses. And this is how the lampstand was made: a hammered work of gold from its base up to its blossom. And it was hammered work according to the pattern that Yahweh showed Moses. So he made the lampstand. All right. So if you're kind of looking, and I asked you in the very beginning to skim, this section from 7 to 10. We have the leaders make an offering. We have the 7 lampstands, and then Moses consecrates the Levites. So if we're thinking about flow, okay, it seems like this 7 lampstands was kind of just chunked in here and just kind of pushed there, that, taking it out, it would make more sense. Okay, we have the leaders making offerings, then moving on to the consecration of the Levites. But we all know that things in the Bible have purpose and meaning. So what do you think the author is trying to do by, kind of disrupting flow a little bit with these 7 lampstands?
I have no idea.
Okay. Any
Well,
other?
It's a transition, and
Okay.
and perhaps the lamps have something to do with the light of the world.
Jesus said, "I am the light of the world." John, huh?
Don't the 7 lampstands show up again in Revelation?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I 7.
What's 7? Where did we see 7 before?
Oh, creation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so one of the things we have to think about when we look at this section is it's very brief. I mean, if you look at it, it really does not give you a whole lot of detail. Okay, it's just talking about the lampstands a little bit. So to really get the full flavor of the lampstands, we have to really go back to Leviticus 24, 1-9. Okay. Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, "Command the Israelites that they should bring you pure olive oil from the beaten olives for the light, to present a lamp continually." Okay, so we know that they're going to be lit continually. "Aaron shall arrange it for outside the curtain of testimony in the tent of assembly from evening until morning before Yahweh continually. It shall be a lasting statute throughout your generations. On the pure golden lampstand he shall range for lamps before Yahweh continually." Okay, and so we have this part of the lamps, but then you go on and it says, "You shall take finely milled flour, and you shall bake it with 12 ring-shaped bread cakes. Each one shall be 2/10 of an ephah, and you shall place them in 2 rows, 6 to the row, on the pure gold table before Yahweh. And you shall put pure frankincense on each row, so that it shall be for the bread as a memorial offering, an offering made by fire for Yahweh. On every Sabbath he shall arrange it in rows before Yahweh continually. They are to be from the Israelites as an everlasting covenant. And it shall be for Aaron and for his sons, and they shall eat it in the holy place. because it is a most holy thing for him from Yahweh's offering made by fire, a lasting rule. And so if we're thinking about this, the idea of the lamps and the lampstand, what are we seeing here? What do you imagine happening? Any good
Well,
ideas?
it's taken away from this, but it's, I'm thinking of in the military sense, the tomb of the unknown soldier, where you have somebody there all the time in honor of the dead.
Okay,
And so you're having somebody there that's going to have to maintain those lamps and keep them lit all the time.
right.
So it's a dedication.
All right, so dedication. So if we kind of look at it, here's the tabernacle. Okay, this is the most holy place, and this is the holy place. And so what he's talking about is over here on the left is the lampstands. Okay, and they're arranged so that they're going to bring their light, and it's going to shine in the direction over here to the table of showbread. Okay, and so what does the table of showbread represent?
I forget, but that was in Leviticus, I remember.
So there, think about it, there are 12 loaves of bread arranged 6 and 6.
That's the tribes.
Oh.
The tribes, okay, so that represents, Israel. And so this lampstand is shining light on Israel. Okay. So as we mentioned, they're lit every morning and every night, and the tabernacle is perpetually filled with light, perpetually shining on the tribe of Israel. Okay. And if we think about it, where did we first see light?
Genesis.
Creation.
In creation.
Yeah.
Genesis chapter or verse 3. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. And God saw the light that it was good. And God caused there to be a separation between light and between darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening and there was morning the first day. And so, just for the very first thing, as we think about this idea of light, we're reminded of creation. But as it mentioned, it said there to light the area in front of the lampstand. So they're going to the shine on the showbread, which represents Israel. Where did we hear about light being shown upon Israel?
When they led them in the desert, the light.
Okay. So, we had them being led by a pillar of fire. Okay. What about last week?
See if I have it somewhere.
Last week, we had the priestly prayer. It was in chapter 6, 24 through 26. Just to refresh your memories.
Yeah, cause your light to shine upon you and be gracious unto you.
Oh,
Yeah.
How could we forget that? We
the
say it.
blessing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's what we sometimes will use as a benediction. But
Mhm.
remember, it was a prayer that God was blessing upon the people through the priest. And so Yahweh will make his face shine on you. Okay. lampstand shining on the showbread. Okay, and so this kind of connects this idea of the priestly prayer and reminding them that this is the way through the most holy place where, Yahweh speaks to Moses. So it adds not only in, the idea that they're being blessed, but this idea of communion with God. So in some ways we see this idea of Eden in the sense that, God, his light is shining on Adam and Eve. And, it's in that garden area that God speaks to them. Okay. And so in some ways, then, if we think about this idea of lampstands in conjunction, with, with this idea, okay, it makes sense. Okay. We have the people making offerings, but then we have, God who's, shining his graciousness and mercy upon them. And then we have the Israelites being blessed. And so, in some ways, it wasn't just kind of put there arbitrarily. It has meaning. And I think, as Mark said, as we kind of look at this and in the 21st century, Jesus said, I'm the light of the world. That's John 8:12. Okay. So I'm the light of the world. And kind of when he says this, in some ways it's a hyperlink back to, this idea in Numbers. And so if we kind of think about, Jesus saying, I'm the light of the world, and now we think about Numbers and what we kind of understand and have learned about this, the light in the new Holy of Holies,
God said to
do we
Moses,
Stop.
somebody was Googling something?
No, I was
She had a technical accident.
I was trying to go forward in the chapter and I hit the play button.
There you go. So, and then do we understand this anyway in a new light? No pun intended.
Yeah, I mean, if the lamps are there shining on the tribes, and instead of just lighting up the tribes, Jesus is saying, I'm the light of the entire world.
Mhm.
That's one way
Okay.
of thinking about it.
All right, good. Well, remember, so Jesus is kind of hyperlinking back here to Numbers, and Numbers what hyperlinks back to creation. And so in some ways that changed. So Jesus is also, when he talks about the light of the world, he's talking about, this idea of creation as well. That when I'm the light of the world, it's not just, light that we see, but in some ways it's a creative force, a creative light. Any other thoughts about that? Okay. So as we continue on, and we go to Numbers 8, 5 to 13, we have the consecration of the Levites. Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, take the Levites from the midst of the Israelites and purify them. So you will do to them, to purify them, sprinkle on them waters of purification, and they will shave their whole body and wash their garments. And they will take a young bull and its grain offering of finely milled flour mixed with oil, and you will take a second young bull as a sin offering. You'll bring the Levites before the tent of assembly, and you will summon the entire community of Israelites. And you will bring the Israelites before Yahweh, and the Israelites will lay their hands on the Levites. And Aaron will offer the Levites as a wave offering before Yahweh from the Israelites, and they will do the work of Yahweh. And the Levites will lay their hands on the head of one bull and offer it as a sin offering, and the other as a burnt offering to Yahweh to make atonement for the Levites. And you will present the Levites before Aaron and before his sons, and he will offer them as a wave offering to Yahweh. So as you think about this idea of the Levites being consecrated, do we hear any echoes from previous readings? Where else do we ever hear about water?
Yeah, the pure, well,
You're saying something, Chris?
no, and back when we were reading Leviticus, we
Okay.
learned, not where we learned about the water and the purification.
Okay.
Um,
Well,
Yeah.
the offerings that are in here after the purification are similar to the ones that we just heard about also.
Right.
But is the water coming in as a way of like going back to creation and thinking about the water there?
Well, you got that, or could go a little bit further. Did anyone else maybe have to go through the waters to be purified?
oh, well, baptism, I mean, John, the but no, that's,
Backwards.
we gotta, yeah.
How about Noah?
Oh, yes.
So if we
Mm,
think about the story in Noah, what
Oh,
happens
yeah.
to Noah? He goes through the waters, purified, comes out on the other side. And what does he do? When he comes off the ark, he builds an altar and makes a sacrifice to
Mhm.
God. So in some ways, as you think about this idea in Numbers, the writer is trying to have that echoes of Noah here, and kind of in some ways coming through as a new creation. Okay, so the echoes of Noah as they come through a symbolic flood, and just like Noah, they offer some sacrifices. And so when we think about that, we think about Noah, we think about new creation and the covenant living on. And then as we go on further, it says that, and he will separate the Levites from the midst of the Israelites, and the Levites will be for me. And after this, the Levites will come to serve at the tent of assembly, and you will purify them, and you will offer them as a wave offering, for they are given to me exclusively from the midst of the Israelites. I've taken them for myself in place of the firstborn of every womb, every firstborn from the Israelites. For every firstborn among the Israelites is mine, both humankind and animal. On that day, I destroyed every firstborn in the land of Egypt. I consecrated them to me. Excuse me. And I've taken the Levites in the place of every firstborn among the Israelites. And I've given the Levites, they're given to Aaron and his sons from the midst of the Israelites to do the work of the Israelites in the tent of the assembly and to make atonement for the Israelites. So a plague will not be among the Israelites when the Israelites come near the sanctuary. So as you heard that piece of scripture, what did you hear?
A trade has been made.
A trade has been made. Okay. You want to unpack that a little bit?
So instead of taking the firstborn, because we're going back to Passover, destroying the firstborn in the land of Egypt, the Israelites were spared, but the Levites are going to kind of be the replacement for the Israelites. So the Levites stand in as the firstborns for all of the 12 tribes, and that they're going to be given to God but not killed. It's just that their lives are given over to God.
Okay. All right, great.
So what is a wave offering?
It's like a Thanksgiving kind of offering.
You were downstairs in the litter box when Sue asked that.
Yeah, I guess we
Yes.
never did find out who won, you or the cat.
Well, I'm here, but the cat's not.
He locked her in the basement and she's meowing at the door. So
Okay, so it's still an ongoing battle.
yes, it is. So there's the atonement going on here.
Uh-huh. Yep, so what we have to understand is that, you know, the firstborn, both humankind and animal, belong to God. Okay, and that through Passover they were spared. But in that sparing, God still demands the firstborn, and in some ways the Levites you know, become the firstborn offering of the tribe of Israel. Okay, so they were kind of swapped out for the firstborn and swapped out for the Passover lamb. And in some ways, then it's as if the tribe is being set up as the sacrificial lamb within Israel. Now, as we think about that concept, do our minds wander anywhere?
Oh, yeah. To the cross.
Yeah, to Jesus. And, you know, so, you know, you think about, okay, you know, when we think about Jesus, okay, he was both the priest and he's the Passover lamb. And so in some ways that concept, this idea of the Levites, you know, sets the foundation for our understanding of Jesus as, you know, the Passover lamb. The other thing we have to think about when we think about this is that the Levites also, you know, kind of as the sacrificial group provided a buffer. Think back around what's it, last week? Probably think it was the week before, where we talked about the organization of the camp. So in the center, you have the tabernacle. Surrounding the tabernacle, you have the Levites, and outside of that, you have, you know, all of the other tribes. Okay, and so in some ways, you think about these Levites; they are this buffer around, you know, the tabernacle, so that you know, God's holiness can bring them blessing instead of, you know, kind of overwhelming them. Okay, and then as we move on, then we come to Passover. Okay, Numbers 9, 1 through 5, and then 9 through 14. So in Numbers 1 through 5, we hear God speaking to Moses. And in that second year after they came out from the land of Egypt, in the first month, they celebrated Passover. Okay, so, you know, a year after coming out of Egypt, they celebrate Passover. But what's part of the problem when we celebrate Passover? Remember last week, what, you know, where are we going to celebrate Passover?
Jerusalem.
Well, we don't have Jerusalem yet. We're going to celebrate it in the camp, right?
Right?
Okay. What needs to happen? Who lives in the
Oh.
camp?
God?
No,
No, all the Israelis.
The Israelites live in the camp, but remember, we talked about this idea being clean
Clean and
and
unclean.
unclean.
Yeah, and you
So-
get kicked out of the camp and until
Yeah.
you're clean and
Right.
purified.
Right. And so, if we look at the second section of Numbers here, verse 9 on, and Yahweh spoke to Moses saying, speak to the Israelites saying, each man that is unclean by a dead person or who is on a faraway journey, you or your descendants, he will observe the Passover of Yahweh. Okay. So first of all, they need to celebrate the Passover. There's no buys here. But what happens is he gives them an alternative to be able to do that. On the second month, on the 14th day at twilight, they will observe it. And they will eat unleavened bread and bitter herbs and the whole thing. But the man who is clean and not on a journey and he fails to observe the Passover, that person will be cut off from the people because he did not present the offering of Yahweh on its appointed time. So think about this idea then of Passover. What do we understand, or what does this tell us about Passover?
That is important.
Okay, great, that it's important. Okay.
It's required, and even
Okay.
if you observe it at first, you still have to participate later.
Okay, good. So it's important. Has mandated participation.
And if you think you can get around it because of certain things, you can't.
You're
Right.
out.
Yep. Okay. So we've all
Excuse, in other words,
say that again.
no excuse not to celebrate it.
Right. So if you're not going to celebrate it, there's dire consequences here. So we understand then that it's important and that it's mandated, but why is there's this kind of harsh and almost draconian type of commandment that you're mandated to do this?
Well, it's like you said a short while ago. It's unity.
Okay.
Well, it reminds me also of your sermon on Sunday that there's this intentional relationship with God. And if you forget about this, or you're making excuses as to why you don't do it, then it means you're not making the relationship with God a priority.
Okay. So in some ways it forces one to make this a priority. Okay. Any other good thoughts?
Well, it's to remind them what God did for them.
Okay.
And
Okay, so it's to remind them. Okay, good. As you think about it, then, does anything else kind of resonate or sit with you as you read that passage?
Well, that last part there, they say if you have an alien in among you, that they too must celebrate the Passover.
Okay, so go ahead.
I'm just saying that's how important it is.
Right, and when it's not just for it's not just for the Israelites themselves, but it's for those that are among them too.
Mhm.
Okay.
Did
So
they have slaves?
yes, they would have had slaves. So it's
So-
those people.
So those were the foreigners?
Yep. Well, and people that just, if you remember, there were some Egyptians that went with them.
Mhm.
So when you say foreigners, it's it's a broad category.
Mhm.
It's a broad category. Okay, so as we think about this idea, this is the first Passover since the Exodus. Everyone was mandated to participate, and we kind of look at it like it's a renewing contract every year. Okay, it's not just a remembering, and that becomes part of the importance that we think about you know, the Passover, that it's not just about remembering. Why do you think it's so important to participate every year, besides God mandating?
It maintains that relationship to God.
Okay, maintains a relationship to God. Okay, great.
It establishes a tradition for generations to come.
Okay, good, love it.
And it means that people will remember that what God did.
Okay,
It's that constant reminder, because when you don't do something, if you don't have a constant reminder, then you let it go by the wayside and you forget about everything.
okay,
I kind of associate it, I know it's totally different, but the same sort of thing as why do we do Stations of the Cross every year?
okay.
You know, you have that reminder, you keep the tradition, uh, as things you may forget or remember differently,
Mm-hmm.
this brings it back into focus.
Yeah. So there's a lot about remembering. And I think that's important. But I think that's only one level of you know, thinking about this, you know, because, you know, my hope and my intention, if I, you know, when I lead Stations of the Cross, is that, you know, it's not only us, you know, remembering you know, what had happened. So not, you know, not just being a historical event.
You're putting yourself there.
Exactly. That there's an invitation to participate. And that in some ways, you know, that act of participation, you know, brings you within the event. So it's not something that just has happened, but in some ways it's something that is happening. Okay. And it's the same kind of thing for you know, our Jewish brothers and sisters when they celebrate Passover. You know, it's not just a remembering of a historical event. Okay. It's really an invitation to kind of participate. Okay. Because if we think about it, to be a member of the covenant people means that I'm part of a family that was liberated by God's justice and mercy. And the idea that I could have died in Egypt, and the life I do have is Yahweh's generous mercy to me. And that justice and mercy was just not a one-time event, but it continually happens. Okay, we're continually swept up in that. And that, you know, in some ways, it's not only just that, but it, you know, the Passover is part of a identity about who they were. You know, without that first Passover, okay, they would fail to exist.
I
But
just had my mind just exploded.
okay,
It just communion, like this whole do this in remembrance of me, and we do, you know, do this over and over again. That invitation to participate and not just remember, like we could talk about it, that Jesus did this at the Last Supper, but instead we actually go through that ritual, and that maybe that's why Wesley thought it was so important to do it so often.
right, exactly, exactly. Um, and so as we think about that, you know, we think about, okay, them being swept up in the Exodus, you know, but you know, in some ways it's the same kind of thing. If we think about Paul, you know, Paul talks about you know, the death, resurrection of Jesus. And the death, resurrection of Jesus for Paul was not something, it was not just a historical event, but it was something that Jesus did that we were invited to participate in. That in some ways, you know, as Christians, okay, these same words that are on this slide are true for us. You know, we're a member of a covenant people, okay, and we were liberated from sin by God's justice and mercy, you know, and it's only by his justice and mercy that we live, because we could have died to our sins, okay, and you know, without the death and resurrection of Jesus, we would fail to exist. We'd fail to live. And I think the last thing here is pretty important too. At being part of this community, okay, is continually remembering that my life doesn't belong to me, that it was purchased by God. And so, you know, as we think about this idea of you know, Exodus, this idea of Passover, okay, that's why it's important. That's why God mandated it, you know, because you know, when he says you'll be cut off, you know, basically he's saying that you do not do this, you do not remember, you're not swept up, you begin to really lose track of who you are. You lose your very identity about who you're supposed to be. So as we think about you know, this section, we went from the first cycle and establishing camp as a new Eden, second cycle getting ready to go. So if we kind of sum it up, God has remade his people. God has shown the light of his face upon them. And we're moving from this idea of chaos to new creation. And so the same could be said about us, you know, as we think about Numbers as well. The other thing we have to remember when we think about this literature is that it's meditation literature. It's really designed for us to think about, to chew on a little bit. You know, it's what God is trying to do is, you know, is get people to live within his presence, you know, and not so much to, you know, live by the letter of the law, but to live by the essence of the law that seeks to move people into relationship with God, okay, so that folks can make their own, they can live and make their own responsible decisions. Okay, so that's all I have to say tonight. So that takes us from week 4. Next time we meet will be week 5. We'll be doing Numbers 10b to 14. That's the challenges in the wilderness. As we get ready to finish up here, any last minute thoughts, insights, aha moments, questions?
It's just, I guess I'm just still sort of in awe in a way that, you know, those who we know who are practicing Jewish people still celebrate Passover. That's like amazing, you know, that lasted that long, you know, that tradition.
Yeah.
It's just pretty cool.
So no meet next week, 2 weeks from now, right?
No meet. Oh yeah, no meeting.
No
Okay.
meeting.
You can
Oh,
have
no
meat.
meat.
I hope you're gonna have a cookout or something and maybe have a little meat, but yeah, no meeting next week.
Okay.
All right.
All right, Jess.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay.
Bye.
Yeah.
Everybody
Okay.
everybody
Thank you.
have a good night.
You
Okay.
too. Thank you.
Good night, all.